All right, let's dive into all of that with the panel now. Senior political reporter Trudy McIntosh and senior reporter out of Sydney, Carolyn Marcus. Let's stay, if I can, with that Trump meeting. There was, I'm not going to call it a meeting, last night at a reception for 100 other leaders, Trudy. They bumped into each other. I don't think our PM could get his phone out fast enough to take that selfie. It's been splashed around everywhere tonight. We do know, though, this afternoon that there now will be a formal meeting, a confirmed meeting. We assume this one's in the Oval Office in the White House in DC. Do you have any more detail?
Well, Peter, yeah, will it be called a happenstance encounter? That's how the Pentagon ultimately referred to the Richard Marles and Pete Hegseth brief meeting when they were at the White House. This time around, Anthony Albanese taking that photo just to show everyone he did, in fact, get that handshake with Donald Trump. As you say, the more serious meeting will be left for the White House on October 20. There had been some subtle smoke signals of this last week when Donald Trump had said to John Lyons, I'm going to dob you in to your Prime Minister when he sees me. At the time, my government sources were stressing nothing had been locked in for New York. They kept saying nothing for New York, nothing for New York, essentially trying to, I think, give a wink and a nudge that something was coming for after New York, the White House. In the end, it probably provides a little more distance when it comes to this issue of Palestinian recognition. By October 20, maybe the president's, it's not so front of mind for him. So there is potential upside. There's always potential downsides in a longer meeting, though, isn't there? We've seen how these Oval Office encounters with the TV cameras in the room can sometimes play out.
How does he deal with Ambassador Rudd? Because you heard him there, and we heard his comments even at the Kirk Memorial. You know, once he takes a set against you, he doesn't likely change his mind.
And people in Trump would say that he does know about the comments that Ambassador Rudd made. Didn't Nigel Farage in that interview actually raise it with him way back in the day? He was asked about this today, the Prime Minister, in the press conference. He says he assumes so, that Kevin Rudd will be there because that's the protocol. So I think he'll be there. Odds on he'll be there. But I don't know, maybe if it's such a big deal, he'd suddenly be sick. But I think ultimately he'd be there.
You could tell the pressure was getting to him today, the Prime Minister, because he got quite tetchy with Latika Burke, an Australian journalist who was there in the press pack. She asked him if he now had Donald Trump's phone number. And this is interesting because we'd earlier seen that Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, had got stuck in traffic, and he literally called the president's private mobile and said, get this traffic moving. So some leaders have it, some don't. This is the exchange.
During the election campaign, you said on the second debate that Donald Trump didn't have a mobile. Since then, we've seen...
I did not say that. I did not say that. Don't verbal me, but yeah.
Well, what do you think he said?
Well, I didn't say that.
Well, what do you think he said?
I didn't.
The quote is there.
I didn't say that, but anyway, keep going. If I did, it's called a joke. Humour.
Oh, you were joking.
Delightful. Well, obviously he has a mobile, and anyone who actually saw the context would know that.
Pretty tetchy, Trudy.
Yeah, I mean, we all remember that in that debate, it was an eye-popping moment that the president doesn't have a mobile when he's very clearly been photographed on it many, many times. I think that's how he puts his truth socials out there, isn't it? I mean, surely he got the mobile number today. I don't have that confirmed, but if I was Anthony Albanese, maybe just ask for it directly when you're there with the president.
I reckon poor Donald Trump went looking for our Prime Minister because he thought otherwise he'll bail me up at the loo. Like, you know, I'm not going to get out of here without being sort of wrestled down by Anthony Albanese. So the picture's up there, the meeting's in the diary. Let's just see where it all lands. It's not the fact of getting a meeting, it's getting something out of the meeting. I want to see what it looks like on October 21 as opposed to talking underwater about this between now and then. I'll come back to this. I've got a panel of experts on net zero in a moment. But the border issue, Caroline, in that speech, if I think his comments on the green left politics of climate change were strong, I tell you what, his border comments were unbelievable. This, I think, touches a nerve right around the world. It was a big issue, obviously, in his election. But what did you make about of those comments?
It was incredible, wasn't it? Only Donald Trump could give that blunt and scathing a speech at the United Nations. It was extraordinary to watch. And his warning in particular for European countries, which have been swarmed with migrants, in recent years, and we've seen where that has led to in many respects there, is that it is time to end what Trump called the failed experiment of open borders. He told them, your countries are going to hell. I mean, it doesn't get a lot stronger than that. And he also accused the United Nations itself for helping to fund this. I mean, he pointed out that the United Nations had budgeted hundreds of millions of dollars to help support migrants' journeys into the US. And he, of course, spoke to how he had managed to close the borders. But I think the broader message there isn't just on illegal immigration, which we have struggled with here in Australia, especially when we didn't have offshore immigration, offshore processing, and we had all these boat arrivals. We've managed to get that under control now, but of course the problem and very real concerns that people have here is to do with legal migration and the numbers, the proportion of legal migration that is allowed to take place, and that's why we've seen these protests on the street, these mass rallies. You know, the message there is that that has to be controlled as well. That is part of the conversation around borders and protecting sovereignty. And one of the issues we've seen here in this country, as they've seen in the US, is that there is a clash of values between many people that have been allowed to come here legally as well. We see it in the almost weekly protests, calls for violence, very open there in the violent protests that have often taken place. And there is clearly a clash in values and people who are not willing to accept the values that we have here. And Trump spoke to those broader concerns, and we've seen that reflected in research as well. I know we'll talk about some of that research a bit later, but there has been a doubling in the rate of concern over immigration in Australians, and that is according to some new polling. So it's definitely top of mind for a lot of people.
You're right, Caroline, to draw the distinction between legal migration and illegal migration. The illegal stuff we've seen with boats, and that's happening around the world, happened obviously here in Australia some time ago, and people have very strong views about that. Legal migration now has also got people angry, and that's where they think they're losing their opportunity to buy a home, too much congestion, too many people too quickly, and all the things we've talked about that people have marched in the streets about in recent months. There's also the issue, Trudy, out today, you know, people who come legally, so they come, say, on a student visa or they come on a tourist visa, and once in Australia, they try and migrate into permanent classes so that they claim asylum. They say they're a refugee. All of that is tested under international law. Well, we learn there's 100,000 people now in Australia who have sought to make that application. It's been assessed by the authorities. They have been proven not to be refugees, but they remain in Australia. So the government is not getting them out, not sending them home. And indeed, this is the statistic that really shocked me. Of all the people putting in a claim last year, only 14%, 14%, were assessed as legitimate by the Department of Home Affairs. Now, this is extraordinary, but, you know, I don't see the heat on Tony Burke, Trudy, to have a response and an answer to this.
Well, yeah, and the reason why there's such a big number of claims that are rejected here is essentially because there's such a big backlog in terms of processing, and the appeals process takes such a long time. There's almost a carrot for people who are here on temporary visas, for example. When that expires, they then apply for an asylum visa, a refugee visa, in the full knowledge that they won't be granted it. But the very fact that they've applied for that means there's basically the clock restarts, there's a whole process, and because there's such a big backlog here, it provides them more time to be in the country. So that's the reason why these numbers are so big. I see immigration experts out today saying the way to try and get this number down dramatically is really reduce the backlog, ensure that these claims are tested quickly, that appeals go through quickly, so there isn't such a long period of time, and essentially that incentive in the system for people to claim asylum when they know they shouldn't actually be granted it.